Let's get one thing fundamentally clear. We can feel pity for child Shigaraki, but we cannot feel pity for adult Shigaraki, our current main villain of the story. And let me explain why. When you look at this chapter, when you look at the origin of what birthed evil itself, what birthed the greatest villain that the My Hero Academia verse will ever know, his origin is sad. And you would be like, if you would have done so-and-so, then this would not have happened. It's, things could have been different. He could have potentially become one of the greatest heroes if things didn't go sideways. But because of those events, it led to his actions later on in his life, and you cannot really excuse him for those actions. So, regardless of how you feel about Shigaraki's character, how you feel about him as a child, you still have to remember the monster that he does become, and he is in the current timeline. Like I said, you can understand his motive, you can definitely, in some ways feel bad for when he finally does get defeated, but he still needs to be brought down because he is a monster, and what he is doing is not something that the world necessarily needs. So let's talk about that. Horikoshi did a fantastic job, I think, with handling Shigaraki as a villain. Because if there is one thing that I have seen from a lot of stories, is that when writers want to give backstory, context to villains, and give them actual real motives that makes you feel for them, there becomes a major issue in a story. And that issue is that sometimes the villain overshadows the main hero, and it makes you start cheering for the villain, and you don't even care about the hero anymore. You don't care about what the hero is fighting for. You just want the hero to finally be done because you want the hero to lose. Because the villain has a better motive and you want the villain to win because he actually is trying to save the world. There is a lot of stories that actually do this. And it's not necessarily bad. They're not bad stories. They're really good stories. But there is an issue. The issue is that you care more about the villain than you do as the hero. And that is kind of why an arc like this is very hard to do. And it's especially hard to do in a shonen manga, because when you think about shonen, it's all about the main character, the character's coming of age story, the character achieving their dream, their goal. You want to see them win in the end. But when you have a villain that's getting a lot of focus and backstory, it makes you think like, I don't care about this hero anymore. And it's risky. It's a very risky thing to do. And when you see this chapter, Horikoshi positioned it in a way to where you still want Izuku to win, but now we understand Shigaraki, and we will love his character growth and what he becomes. Even if he is a villain, he's a monster, we cannot wait to see how he changes the world, but also when he is finally brought down by Izuku. And so, the way this character's origin story is done, it makes it to where Izuku isn't overshadowed. It's a perfect balance between both characters, Shigaraki and Izuku, and I respect that. That's something really hard to do, and I think, Horikoshi, he did an insane job with handling both characters throughout the story, and especially with Shigaraki as well, because even if it's been very obvious for a long time that Shigaraki's development is kind of happening at the same time as Izuku's, and whatever Izuku's going through, he's going through, but we never really had as much time with Shigaraki as Izuku. And so seeing how in just the span of 20-something chapters, he's as developed almost as Izuku, it kind of blows my mind a little bit. It's kind of like he finally unshackled himself from All for One. That's kind of what you can look at this arc for, and it's very similar to Izuku's shackles that he had to All Might. Do you remember that? That was the whole context of Izuku's growth as a character, as a hero, was that he was constantly trying to replicate All Might. He was always trying to replicate him, try to use every move like him, etc., etc., and eventually he realized that he needed to navigate away from trying to be just the mirror image of All Might. He needed to become his own man. And so because of that, that's led to his growth in the current series. And Shigaraki's a very similar way. He's a guy that just is a naive boy, a typical villain, evil, and now that he's finally getting his, memories back, he's remembering everything, and he's getting context, he's finally unshackling himself from his mentor, which is All For One. He is finally able to grow and become his own man, which is what All For One wanted in the first place, was for Shigaraki to become his own man. And that is what has happened clearly after this chapter. There is mainly just narration to this chapter, and the narrator obviously is Shigaraki himself, adult Shigaraki, and he tries to give context to individual events that's happening on, the manga, like at a certain given point in each panel. And as we know, he's kind of explaining why he did so-and-so, why he did this, or the emotions behind so-and-so, like, what he did to his father at the end of the chapter. He tries to explain it to us as the reader. But when you think about his child self, it's still a very different entity. And let me kind of clarify. When you think about real life, okay, let's, all look at ourselves for a second. If you take back and look back at your life, you most likely can realize that your childhood self, compared to your current, let's say, teenage adult self, is completely different. They're two separate individuals. Most likely your child self was very immature, didn't really understand how to vent or show emotions, very emotional, etc., and your adult self is more mature. And that's kind of what we can look at Shigaraki. As he has grown as a person, become an adult, he has become very matured and mellowed out. He is now able to dissect and look at the situation of his life and analyze it. But when he was a child, he didn't really know. He didn't really know or understand what he was really doing. Even if he was showing emotions like murderous intent, he had no idea what that really meant until now that he is an adult. So the two individuals, the two Shigarakis we see in this chapter are very distinct, very different. You have child Shigaraki and adult Shigaraki, and you should understand that the context of this chapter, with him narrating, isn't fully supposed to represent what child Shigaraki was feeling. Because with how much time has passed, there is time to where his, viewpoint on himself could become rather skewed, or he might not fully understand the context at that time. Example, he talks about when he first attacks, when he first gets rid of the dog, and, Hana, disintegrates as well, he wasn't intentionally doing that. That's when his quirk was starting to activate, and they both disintegrated, and he thought it was a villain attack. And then as soon as he touched the ground, and then it started going towards his mother and his grandparents, and they started to disintegrate, he realized, he let, basically destruction just flow through him, and he realized what he was, and how much he kind of hated everyone, and then he purposely attacked his father. Even if adult Shigaraki is giving a proper, accurate representation of the events, like explaining it to us, the emotions were very fundamentally different. When you look at that scene when he goes towards his mom, he wasn't actually letting, anger and all that flow through him. He was actually someone that was just so confused. You can tell by his face. He was so confused, he was needing warmth from a loved one. He needed someone to be able to tell him it's okay. And when he reached for his mother, the very person that he wanted desperately to tell him it's okay disintegrated in front of him. And so his emotions just very conflicted, and he broke in that moment. And when the, sheer rage and sadness, he directed all his hatred towards his father, because he thought his father was the cause of all this. The reason why all of this has happened, the reason why everybody's disintegrating, he was blaming it on his father as a child. And so that is why he attacked his father, and then eventually he found out the emotion that he has longed for, and that is the ability to get rid of the itch that has plagued him, the itchiness on his face. And this explains a lot about current Shigaraki's character and his motive. This one line where it says the itch went away is very important. Very, very important. Probably one of the most important lines out of these past few chapters of Shigaraki's backstory. Let's talk about it. The reason why it's important is because we gotta look at what Shigaraki wants. Shigaraki, he wants to destroy, obviously. But with the context of the previous chapter, he tells Redestro, I don't want everything to be destroyed. He doesn't want a future like that, or no future. He wants something. The thing is that little moment at the end of this chapter explains that Shigaraki just wants to destroy the things that bother him. And this has already kind of been obvious to begin with, but it gives more context. Things that bother him cause him to have an itch. This, itch where he just keeps scratching at his eyes or whatever, and it hurts him. And he does not like that feeling whatsoever. And every time he feels this itch, he is reminded of his childhood. He's reminded of his father/family, and he does not want to be reminded of that. So that is why he wants to destroy the things that he does not like, because he is reminded of what started this all. So, like I said, that's very important, because now we understand why he wants to attack people like All Might, why he wants to take out heroes, is because it makes him just have an irritation, which reminds him of his origin, and he wants it gone. So I love this chapter. It's a really good chapter to kind of explain all of those events. I think Horikoshi perfectly captured the emotions of a scared child in this chapter. It starts off where he's holding his dog, and his dog is just a pile of meat on the ground. And the sheer horror, the facial reaction from Shigaraki says it all. He does not know how to cope, because this is a child at the age of 5, 4, and, he's obviously never seen something so horrific in his life. And he sees something like this after watching, heroes on TV or something, or hearing about them. He knows that it's probably a villain, and he's freaking out. His mind is racing and all that. He doesn't know. He feels like whatever's happening, it can happen to him. His emotions in his face just say so much. You don't need words to really explain the emotions he was feeling. And then as Hana walks up, as he's dizzy and confused, he reaches out for the closest person, and then Hana breaks into pieces. And this is kind of something that would happen to an individual. It would happen to a boy his age, or anyone, honestly. When you see a shocking moment like this happen in front of you, you would reach out to the closest person, which he did, but then they broke, and then he was still trying to cope with what was happening, because just so much was happening at once, with so many emotions just flaring, that then, after everything was broken down, he realized what happened. He was the one causing it all, and then we see the events at the end. Seeing his emotions turn from, scared to horrified to just, sheer happiness and rage at the end speaks a lot about just these 15 pages. But there's a big thing about this that stood out to me, and it's that Shigaraki, he clearly wanted to hear just one thing. He just wanted his family to be on his side and say, I'm sorry, I love you, whatever. And he wanted that, but he couldn't get it. And it's just like what Horikoshi's been using a lot throughout this arc, or actually with a lot of villains, it just takes one bad day. And the concept might be a little bit used a lot in this arc, but it still is very, very true. It is something that does happen to people. And it kind of shows what separates the villains from the heroes, in that it just takes one unlucky day to really turn your world upside down, and then you're the biggest monster that the world has ever seen. See, things could have been very different for Izuku. If he would have not become a hero, and he might have, been constantly pushed down by society because of Bakugo, he could have become a villain. It's potential. There was potential for him to become a villain if things would have been slightly tweaked. And so when you think about it, all the heroes we see could easily become what Shigaraki is. Because when you think about it, Shigaraki, his quirk activated at age 5. And when you think about his quirk, it's not something you can really prepare for. You can't really prepare to have a quirk like that, no matter who you are. Example, let's say quirks actually existed in real life right now, and you are Shigaraki. You have a happy life, regardless if your father wasn't, being evil to you or whatever, regardless of the situation Shigaraki was in. Let's just say that your quirk activated and you were holding your mother and she just shattered in your arms. That would break someone. It would legitimately break someone. And it's not something you can actually be prepared for. You cannot prepare for that. You can't say, oh, this child's gonna have, a quirk to disintegrate people. You can't actually judge that. So everybody could turn out to be like Shigaraki. Shigaraki was just birthed with a very unlucky circumstance, his quirk. And if it wasn't for that, he would not probably be in the exact same situation. It might have been worse, who really knows, but the point is that you cannot prepare for something like that. And that is something that society in general in My Hero Academia isn't properly realizing, is that some people are born with quirks that destroy their lives. It's like a disability, and they can't do anything about it. Twice. Good example. Toga, good example. And then Spinner as well, way he was pushed down in society. And then now Shigaraki. We know now that these individuals, because of their upbringing or what they were born with, has caused their lifestyle to be like it is. And society isn't properly handling this. They're not properly looking out for individuals that might have quirks that are extremely dangerous, but they're not. So obviously, we're seeing more flaws within the society that needs to be corrected, something that needs to be changed, and it's something that is going to continue to happen, because even if Shigaraki is defeated, someone like him will eventually come about once again. Even if they're not as powerful, someone like him will come back, because there will always be individuals that are born with quirks that are so destructive in nature that they can't do anything about it. Like, they get their quirk activated, and the first activation of the quirk just harms the people they love. Very similar to what happened to Gentle, when he used this quirk and he messed up, and he harmed an individual civilian and all that, but he was trying to be helpful. Stuff like that could happen. It just, the quirks are very dangerous, and even if hypothetically quirks were completely removed from the equation, they didn't exist, the problem would still stand with how current society is. Current society isn't perfect either, so there's just a lot of issues, and it doesn't seem like this world is ever going to be perfect, but there needs to be ways to kind of figure out who is dangerous and who is not, and be able to help them, or maybe a way to potentially remove their quirk if it really is that deadly. Whatever the case may be, though, this chapter does open up a lot. It's a loaded chapter, and I cannot wait to see what's going to happen next. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And if you want to get notified for whenever I upload a video, please click the bell icon down below. And with that, Chibi out.